Hi, and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about a piece called Stitch. Now this comes from the hashtag sixfanarts challenge on Instagram. You post up a blank page of boxes, ask any of your followers to make some suggestions of some fan art you can do, and based off that, you create 6 different pieces of fan art. Yesterday I published a piece for Belle and the Beast, and today we're going to be looking at Stitch. Stitch comes from the Disney cartoon Lilo and Stitch, and I thought we'd take some time in this video to talk a little bit about the Disney method or the Disney style to their animation, to their character design. A little bit of a story behind that. I'll get to it in just a second, so stay tuned. Before we do, though, let me just take a moment here and do my shameless plug. Take a moment, subscribe for me if you could, please. Just click on that subscribe button. You'll get some notifications as well if you like about new videos coming out, but more importantly, it just helps me make sure that I stay motivated and keep putting up these videos as much as possible. So just do me that favor, and it helps me out quite a bit. Thanks. All right, now let's talk about the drawing itself. So let me start by just saying that for all the 6 pieces of fan art that I'm going to be publishing, I'm going to attempt to come at it from something of an illustrative method. And all I really mean by that is that my intent here is to have every picture tell some sort of a narrative or some sort of a story just in that single frame that you see there. In this case with Stitch, we're telling some sort of a story that he's annoyed by being petted. And that is true to his character in the movie. It's been a little while since I've seen it, but I have gone back and watched a couple of clips just to get ready to draw this piece here. And, you know, he is somebody that isn't necessarily comfortable with being touched by anybody but Lilo. So, again, true to his character, it was not necessarily easy to find some sort of a specific look on his face that I was going for. This specific picture doesn't really exist anywhere in the movie. It's something of an original composition I put together using a character that obviously already exists. But, you know, having said that, this might be a great time to start talking about kind of drawing this in the Disney style versus my style and kind of the mixture of the two that I kind of come up with in this piece. So if we talk about the Disney style for a second, let me just kind of state flatly that I've never worked for Disney. So anything I'm about to tell you here is just something that I've heard. I can't necessarily confirm through any means of my own. But here's kind of how this works. A while ago, when I was much younger, I had the opportunity to meet a professional illustrator. He was a neighbor of my aunt. And he was kind enough to take me into his studio, show me his portfolio, where he worked, some of the media that he liked to work with, and we got to talking about, drawing. He had seen some of the, kind of amateurish drawings that I was doing back then as a teenager. I guess he saw some potential in me and decided that he wanted to kind of give me a little bit of advice, a little bit of critique and things like that. And so, at some point or another in this discussion, he pulled out a piece of paper and a pencil, and he just kind of started lightly sketching Mickey Mouse. Just that classic Disney Mickey Mouse that we all know and love. The thing about it, though, is that as he was drawing it, he got the whole thing done in roughly about 10-15 seconds. It was just a kind of a gesture drawing, just done with some loose lines. But the point that he was trying to make was something that's very true to the Disney style and the Disney method. And here's really what it amounts to. Disney, in general, doesn't really draw straight lines. Now remember, this all goes back to animation, not just character design. They are trying to simulate life as they animate a creature walking across the screen or something similar. And so in this Disney method, in this Disney style, straight lines rob you of that lifelike feeling, if that makes sense. And so curved lines and staying away from things that are straight help kind of breathe life into the character and give them that ability to help move across the screen as they're trying to go through that animation process. Now, is this true, false, or indifferent? I can't really say for sure, but I'll tell you, it makes a lot of logical sense. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to draw completely like that. My own style actually involves a lot of straight and kind of jagged lines with some sharp points, but I'm also not animating anything here. So as I'm drawing this Stitch here, I am kind of sticking true to that kind of Disney mentality where I'm not really drawing very many straight lines or any at all, really. This is mostly just curves and circles. The hand is a little bit different. I drew that kind of a little bit more in my own style, and you can see that there are some more straighter, more pointed lines in that area of the piece. So this is kind of a mixture of styles here, but, ultimately I think it kind of works. Now, the thing about Stitch, and this is where I think is a little bit interesting, is that, I'm not that familiar with this character. I've seen the movie a couple of times, but I'm not as familiar with him as, say, Beauty and the Beast or Aladdin or The Little Mermaid or something like that. And so, for that reason, I really had to spend some time taking a look at photos of Stitch online to get an idea as to I want to pose this creature, how to, put his arms in a certain place, what the claws look like, and how the nose fits on the face, all these different things. And what I started realizing as I was laying out some of the rough sketches is that if I was doing this with a paper and pencil, not in some sort of a digital medium, but literally paper and pencil, a circle template really would be how I draw this whole thing. Just breaking out a circle template of all the various different sizes of circles and laying out all the various body shapes, and that would be it. Stitch would just be a series of circles and curves, all kind of formed up together to form the body, and etc. So if you look at it from that point of view, you can kind of see how it might be a little bit easier to kind of experiment a little bit, get some of these shapes down, and do this character design that Disney is obviously so very, very successful at. And let's be honest here, Stitch is a really great character. He's cute, adorable, aside from the personality that he brings to the screen, even just a still drawing of him, just with those curves and everything like that, gives him a sense of life and kind of entertainment purpose, so to speak. All right. Now, as we kind of go through here, I'll also just want to take a little bit to kind of talk about the coloring method. I mentioned this in some other videos, but I think it might bear mentioning again here because we're doing something that's a little bit more simplistic than some of the coloring and shading and lighting that I usually do. So I'm still following the same method. I'm using a lot of layers and I'm using blend modes to get shadow and light in. But Stitch is a little bit unusual in this sense just because of two main things. Number one, he's almost entirely blue. And number two, he's a cartoon, so I'm not really going to be doing a lot of subtle contouring with shadow or light or anything like that. It's basically just going to be hard painted in shadows. And I found this to be really interesting because when I went to go look for reference photos, I didn't really see a lot of pictures of Stitch that had shadow in them. This might be for a couple different reasons, but a lot of the stills that I found were directly from the movie, and a lot of the movie took place outside in Hawaii, so maybe the idea here is that sun's so bright there just wasn't a lot of shadow around. But I really had to kind of conjure up shadow for my version of this and kind of make it up almost whole cloth here for the most part. So just like the rest of my paintings, you probably see the palette that I've created up in the upper right hand corner of the screen, and so that should pretty much spell out how I'm doing light and darks here. The yellow up towards the top is my light source. Remember, we're outside, so sunlight is our light source. Yellow, a warm light, is what we're using. So the opposite of that, a cool blue shadow, and I'll throw this out there. I kind of debated whether or not I really wanted to do a cool shadow here, mostly because of the fact that I'm using something of a blue, and blue is what color Stitch is. So I had some concerns as to whether or not all this blue would get muddled and make it very, very difficult to kind of tell one body part from the other or get some sense of depth and dimension. Here's the thing about it, though. It's the beauty of working with digital programs like this and working in layers. I put everything in and knew that if I had to make some adjustments to it later, I could. And I can do that in a couple different ways. So I could certainly delete the layer and start all over again if I wanted to kind of approach the shadows from scratch. Or if I just wanted to play around with the color a little bit, I can do that as well. So the way that you do that is just get your, shadow in any way that you want to. And then you can set a lock on that layer and then just change the color as you please without having it spill out into any other areas. It will only affect the areas that you've already kind of colored in. So you can change color at a whim and just do some experimentation and kind of dial it in to see what's right for you. I didn't do that so much with the shadow on this one. I kind of found that once I got it painted in, I liked the way it looked, but I did have to do that a little bit with the light source. In some parts of the body that I was rendering here, the light source got just a little bit too bright for my taste. And so I adjusted a couple different ways. I changed the color a couple times. I also changed the blend mode a couple times, and ultimately decided to lower the opacity as well. Now, brief word on light as far as that's concerned, because every piece is a little bit different with when it comes to light. Because your light sources come from different subjects like the sky or a lamp in a room or something like that, you may want to think about experimenting with your blend modes when it comes to painting in your light. Anytime I do shadow, it's always going to a multiply mode. That's just kind of my go-to. But light blend modes, I change up a little bit until I find something that works for me. And there's several of them there to choose from. There's a soft light, there's a hard light, there's a linear light. I found that hard light is something that I'm kind of moving into a little bit more often lately, although for a period of time I was working mostly linear light. With Stitch, however, there was a light source kind of coming in from the right side of his head that I just thought was a little bit too much, and I ended up setting that one. It was soft light, just because I felt it kind of fit everything else that I was kind of doing with the rendering on the body. So again, experimentation is really the kind of the method here, and the beauty of it is that even if your experiment just kind of blows up in your face, you always have that ability to delete the layer without affecting the rest of your drawing. So good layer management is really, I think, key to working in digital environments like this, especially if you're new to it, and understanding that anytime you want to try something new, just throw another layer on top of it, and that way you can kind of get brave and experiment and kind of reap the benefits of it. Truth be known, a lot of what I'm doing here that I feel is successful is me just trying it out and seeing what I can get to work. A great example of this, you won't see it in this piece, but in other pieces I've done, is hair. I still can't figure out how I want to render hair, and I change my methodology every single time I do a new painting. So I experiment, I work with different brushes, work with different blend modes, and ultimately get a look that I like, but it's because I've layered over layer over layer over layer, and it's something that I've experimented with so much that I don't know that I can necessarily repeat that same exact thing for the next painting. So I'm back to square one with the experimentation of how I might want to get that rendered in a way that looks okay to me and works with the rest of the piece. I will talk about hair a little bit later on with a piece I got coming up next week, so stay tuned for that one. It'll be there in the near future. So one final word here about the background before we wrap things up. The background is meant to kind of recede, sit in that background and bring the character forward a little bit, and that means I'm trying to strive for a little bit of contrast. Generally speaking, when things recede into the background, they tend to get a little bit more blue, but because Stitch is so blue, that really wasn't an absolution in this case. So I went with the opposite route, and when I finished this whole piece up, I went into that background layer, behind all the layers that are Stitch in the arm, put in a brand new layer and just made it orange. Now you're not really going to be able to see that very well because as soon as I did that, I lowered the opacity down to about 5 or 10%. So it's really, really subtle. You can barely see it, but it does help create that contrast to bring in a little bit of depth and push that foreground just a little bit more forward. So that's our piece here. I hope you enjoyed the video. As I mentioned before, I got 4 more of these coming out in the near future, so make sure you come on back, stay tuned, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care.